Hi, my name is Megan Martinez, and I chose prompt option B involving the behavior analyst named Quinn, who has generated the rule, if I don't solve every client issue perfectly, I'm not a good behavior analyst. Part 1. Describe the rule-governed behavior. Quinn responds to and explain why this is an example of rule-governed behavior rather than contingency-shaped behavior. Well, first off, what is rule-governed behavior? It is behavior controlled by verbal or written rules about the relationship between behavior and consequences rather than by direct contact with those consequences. In rule-governed behavior, the individual follows a rule because they have learned the verbal antecedent-contingent relationship, not because they have experienced the actual outcomes through personal, repeated practice. The rule Quinn responds to is a private verbal rule that asserts a specific standard of performance and a self-judgment of good or bad based on perfection. This rule sets a standard for Quinn's performance that is absolute and perfectionistic. It implies that any failure to achieve perfection in client outcomes equates to failure in their professional identity and competence, not discovered through first-hand trial and error with clients. So why is this not contingency-shaped behavior? The controlling relation is a verbal rule about performance and self-worth and not a direct contingent consequence of every action, like truly experiencing clients' outcomes, feedback, or job-related consequences over time. Quinn's underlying belief for assessing performance may result in heightened anxiety if she feels these standards are not being achieved. Part 2. How do neutral stimuli related to work acquire anxiety-inducing functions? Neutral stimuli acquire functions through their relation to the rule and the predicted aversive outcomes described by the rule, even if those stimuli aren't inherently aversive. How this can happen with work-related neutral stimuli? Client feedback, whether positive or negative. Feedback often triggers strong emotions because people equate their performance with their self-worth. Even neutral comments may feel like criticism if the underlying belief is that anything less than perfection signals failure. Data collection. Routine data tasks like recording outcomes, charting progress, could become anxiety triggers because the rule implies perfection is required. Discovering even slight deviations can signal imperfection. Supervision meetings. Feedback from supervisors, even when constructive, can take on heightened emotional meaning. The rule turns neutral evaluation into a sign of personal failure whenever flaws appear. Client outcomes. Even neutral or routine client progress notes can acquire anxious function because the rule links the behavior analyst's worth to solving every client's issue perfectly. Any client setback becomes a cue for feared self-evaluation. How the transformation occurs. The verbal rule establishes an aversive function for otherwise neutral stimuli by predicting negative personal consequences for not being perfect. Through history of rule-based impact and emotional learning, these stimuli gain aversive properties. Anxiety, self-criticism, even without direct personal experiences tied to each event. Over time, these previously neutral stimuli become conditioned stimuli that elicit the anxiety responses due to their association with the high stakes of the self-imposed rule. Part 3. Avoidance behaviors. How the rule can drive avoidance. Quinn may avoid seeking feedback or delaying it, hoping to postpone the moment when the rule would be activated. For example, postponing supervision meetings to avoid anxious self-judgment, avoiding taking on complex cases or new clients, fearing that solving perfectly would be required for self-worth, or avoiding potential negative feedback that could trigger the rule. Quinn might seek constant reassurance from supervisors or colleagues to validate that they are good enough, which maintains the rule's influence by externally reinforcing the self-judgment. What maintains the rule-driven behavior? The immediate reduction of anxiety in the short term. If following the rule or avoiding the anxiety-evoking stimuli reduces immediate distress, this negative reinforcement maintains the rule following. And constant reinforcement history. If past experiences show that perfection prevent negative evaluations or negative outcomes, the rule becomes more solidified and avoidance becomes reinforced. Thank you for watching.